Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill here live from Lambeau Field. We are still in the midst of the first round of the NFL draft, but the Green Bay Packers have picked up their first pick in this 2023 draft, edge rusher Lukas Van Ness out of Iowa. Well, actually, let me back up. We say edge rusher. This guy can play a little bit of an everywhere along the front seven. He started at Iowa on the interior defensive line. He said he put on 60 pounds in his first year at Iowa, his redshirt freshman year, and then was moved around and ended this last year on the outside, which is where he feels most comfortable. Asked where he might play for the Packers, he said that's still kind of up in the air. It's really going to be a matter of where they want him. He can play edge, he can play offensive line, he can play outside linebacker. I'm sorry, he can really kind of play anywhere along that end of the line. And this is a position that General Manager Brian Gutekunst had mentioned several times leading up to the draft as being a deep edge class and something that he really liked about this class, which is the complete opposite of kind of where the Packers are right now with this unit. They have, guys like Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, but not much behind them. It's a unit that lacks a lot of depth, especially with Rashawn Gary now coming back from injury and Packers not knowing exactly how soon into the new season they will have him. It's a unit where they had to get some more production and quickly, and they get it now in Lukas Van Ness, nicknamed Hercules because of the blonde hair, but also his physical prowess. This is a guy that's still very, very raw. He never started a game at Iowa in his 2 years playing there. Despite that, though, left in the 2020 season leading the Hawkeyes in tackles per loss with 13.5 and sacks with 6. Over the last 2 years, he has 13.5 sacks total. So a sack machine, as he likes to call himself, which is very reminiscent of the player that he models his game after in the Packers, which is Preston Smith. He said he likes to watch Preston Smith a lot. He likes how Preston Smith is what he calls a big sack guy. And he said he sees a lot of similarities in Preston's game and himself. Van Ness actually got to work out this offseason with Kenny Clark and, ironically, quarterback Aaron Rodgers out in Thousand Oaks, California. So he said he already got a little bit of a taste of the Packers culture and what it's like to be inside the building. We did get to speak to Van Ness for a while. He actually was watching in the state of Wisconsin. He grew up in northern Illinois, just north of Chicago. Big hockey guy, wasn't a huge Chicago Bears football fan or anything of those sorts growing up, was mostly into hockey. But said his parents have a house near Lake Geneva in Wisconsin, and that's where he was watching tonight's draft. So he said it felt a little bit serendipitous to be going to the Packers. He's not going to have to come very far at all. I see some questions coming in, so let's go ahead and hop to a couple of them. Pat asked off the top, why didn't Packers pick a wide receiver or a tight end? There were always going to be 4 positions that the Packers could have taken here at number 13. Wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, or edge rusher. And really, if you see the Packers take any of those 4, then that's a success because those are their biggest positions of need. You could possibly even throw safety in there and lump wide receiver and tight end together as a pass catcher and say that 4th position of need would be a safety. But this was always going to be a position of need, and tight end and edge rusher specifically are the ones that Brian Gutekunst mentioned multiple times leading up to the draft. That being said, why not tight end? Perhaps they didn't see enough there in Dalton Kincaid to take him at 13 or possibly even Michael Myers for that matter. Lukas Van Ness, even though he hasn't started a game, was given a very high first round grade from many draft pundits. So he probably wouldn't have still been sitting there at 42. The Packers would have had to have traded back into the first round to grab him later. He was someone that was going to go around these mid-teens. And so for best available at that position and best available overall, that's probably why the Packers went edge rusher there, especially when you consider it was a position of need. And yes, this is a very good point. Karen responds to Pat's question there as well. It says, my guess is they are worried about Gary coming off his ACL injury. I think that has a lot to do with it as well, because not only is there a lack of depth in that position, now you have a starter in Gary who you don't know exactly when he'll be back. You remember he hurt himself in that week 9 game versus the Detroit Lions. last season, and so that could be mid-season before he's fully ready to come back. Of course, we also saw Robert Tonyan hurt himself week 8 of 2021, and he was ready by the first week of 2022. But that's always an iffy injury, and you're never quite sure how long a guy's recovery is going to be. So having someone that you can possibly whip into shape and mold and be ready by week 1, even if it is a rookie, has got to be a huge sigh of relief for the Packers. Let's see, got some more. Levi with a counterpoint to Pat's question. Let's go. We needed an edge rusher. People need to chill out. We will address weapons tomorrow. Packers have pick 42 and pick 45 in the second round, and then pick 63, I believe, in the third round. So 3 picks pretty quickly in the mid second round. Keep in mind, we still have, I'm trying to see what the TV says. We've still got a few picks here tonight. That's enough there with 42 and 45 to move back into the first round if they need to. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but, it's something to keep in mind. Reva says no one seems to like this pick and not have gotten wide receivers, but Goody, I'm sure, has a plan. I'm very interested to know how many of you do or don't like the pick, because it wasn't surprising to me. This was a position that if you read our draft predictions on PackersNews.com, this was the position that I said the Packers would go. I went a little more with tradition and picked a Georgia player and said Goody would go for Nolan Smith, who I don't even know if he's been taken yet. But this is always a position that I thought was a really, really good chance for the Packers to address at number 13. Let's see. Karen also asked, is there any talk around Lambeau about who we might take in round 2? We desperately need a tight end. Sad to see Tonyan go. I think he started to get better after his injury. I think a lot of people were surprised to see, or sad to see, Robert Tonyan go. He was such a big part of this Packers offense. He wanted to come back, but it was going to be at a price point that the Packers didn't necessarily agree with, and I think that was the issue there. So that being said, I do think we see them go tight end very soon. The fact that there were 4 tight ends that had been mocked in various drafts in the first round or early second, and last I looked from when we started this Facebook Live, none of those tight ends had been taken yet. So we could still see some of those guys maybe go here at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, or as we said, we could see the Packers trade up to grab one of those guys in the next few picks here or early tomorrow's second round. And so that being said, you have a depth of tight ends here in this class, and consider that's such a position of need for the Packers. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's where we see them go next. Let's see. We got a couple of questions here. Jason says, I was hoping that Zay Flowers would drop to the second round a few drafts ago. We could have had the opportunity to pick up DK Metcalf, who was doing fantastic in Seattle. Now they picked Zay Flowers. That's sort of just the way the draft goes. That's the way the cookie crumbles, so to speak. There's always going to be a dearth of talented players, especially on this first night. And it's a matter of who's there when you pick and what you need. And that's the balance you have to strike. Wide receiver depth is probably necessary, but we've seen Brian Gutekunst really hit on a lot of wide receivers in that second round and those later day 2 and early day 3 picks. And so for as much fun and as ironic as it would have been for the Packers to take a wide receiver in the first round this year, it wasn't necessary. It would have been purely for the story, for the narrative. I don't think it was necessarily necessary, because you can trust Christian Watson, you can trust Romeo Doubs to lead this unit. Yes, you still need more guys. You still need a slot guy. You still need some depth there. But I don't think you necessarily have to go after one in the first round like maybe you probably wanted to see them do in the past. Jason also pointing out that the Lions are making different moves in this draft. Bonnie says she loves this pick with Lukas Van Ness, and I think we're going to see more and more people start to come around to it as they sort of evaluate what he can do and what he can bring to this Packers offense, or Packers defense. I'm sorry. Levi says, oh wait, I lost you, Levi. I'm sorry. Levi says Sam Laporta in round 2. someone to look after. Karen says she's 50-50 on the pick. I would rather have seen an offensive tackle. However, a backup for Gary right now is a good move. And I honestly think that might have been what it came down to more than anything. I know our colleague Tom Silverstein essentially said the same thing, that he thought they would go offensive tackle. He thought they should go offensive tackle because David Bakhtiari's time is probably coming to a close. The sand is running out of the hourglass for Bakhtiari's time with the Packers, and you're going to need someone there, especially for a young quarterback like Jordan Love. That being said, the immediate need is edge rusher, and that's what they have addressed with Lukas Van Ness. Let's see. We've got some more coming in here. Levi with a couple of different names to watch, and then Mingo as well. Yes. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up, Levi. Van Ness can play inside as well. He'll be a chess piece. While at Iowa, he played both interior and exterior. He can drop back to outside linebacker. He's really that hybrid guy. He's the hybrid guy on the outside that you have to play in the NFL these days. If you're going to address the spread offense and the RPOs really more than anything, if you're going to negate an RPO, which is becoming more and more the norm in the NFL, then you have to have a hybrid guy on the edge. And that's something that Lukas Van Ness can do. And then the fact that he can also slide in and play the inside, he's probably a little bit on the smaller side to do that now, and especially in the NFL, but he has the experience doing that, and therefore the skill set as well will be huge. Mike does not like the pick at all, says Goody and Murphy both need to be fired. Well, let's wait. Let's give him a little bit of time to see how this class turns out. Bonnie says he's great for special teams too. Yes, he blocked 2 kicks this past year at Iowa. So wouldn't be surprised at all if we see him going on Rich Bisaccia's special teams unit right away. I know Jair Alexander has wanted to be the guy to block a kick or block a punt here recently, but I think that may just be more his bucket list than anything. We really could see Lukas Van Ness maybe become that guy, the guy that Rich Bisaccia sends over the next year. Jason asks, are there any players that Goody is considering for the safety position? Brian Branch has not been drafted, correct? Is he still on the board? Yeah, I'm right. I'm actually surprised that Brian Branch is still on the board. I would go after him. I know that there are concerns about his speed, but in my opinion, that's not the top quality you need for a safety. He is an excellent tackler, and that to me more than makes up for anything he might lack in speed. Karen says this is Alexander's year. You wait and see. I'll let Jair know you believe in him, that this could be the year he blocks one. Mike says first they blew the Adams trade and now they blow pick number 1. I'm interested to know why you think this has been blown, and what you would have rather have seen them do there instead. Randy asked as well, are there any players that LaFleur is considering for the tight ends position? We've kind of gone over those. I believe Dalton Kincaid is still on the board. I'm just looking to see who's getting picked up right now. So there's still a lot of tight ends that are there on the board. Seeing if there's any more comments here that I have missed that we can pop up here for you. Okay. Bill says, I think we should have addressed the tight end position with the first pick. The tight end room at Lambeau is empty. The kid from Notre Dame is polished and would fill a need for a decade. The kid from Notre Dame, Michael Mayer, is probably the most balanced tight end at the top of this class. He can block. He can pass catch. He led college football this past year in touchdowns for tight end. He had 9, I believe. Dalton Kincaid was right behind him with 8. Dalton Kincaid, I want to say, averaged around 13 yards a reception this year. But Kincaid is more of a pure pass-catching tight end. He's not really a blocking tight end, and that's what you do get out of Michael Mayer, the kid from Notre Dame. Like I said, last I saw, they are both still on the board. Levi says, yes, tight end will be addressed tomorrow. Bonnie responds, they didn't blow the Adams trade. Adams wanted to go to Vegas. Yes, that's an important qualifier there. It's important to remember they actually offered more than the Raiders did. It was Adams' decision to go play with Derek Carr. Levi says, why take a tight end round one? You take an edge at 13, not a tight end. 13 is awfully rich for a tight end, and maybe that's what factored into it as well. That's not to say that they don't have a need there. It's just a matter of what you also need to spend that pick on. Although we did see 2 running backs go in the top 12 tonight, which is something that we haven't seen in a decade, it feels like. Okay. Looking to see if there's any more comments. I don't see too many more questions here. Jason says, I'm hoping that Dobbs will step up more. Any word of the voluntary offseason workouts between the players? We do know a lot of the guys, especially the younger guys, have been here wanting to work out with Jordan Love. So that's been encouraging for the Packers. Last note on Van Ness before we slip out here. Brian Gutekunst will be meeting with the media in the next few minutes here. He wore 91 at Iowa. Preston Smith tweeted that 91 was available to Lukas Van Ness for the right price. Lukas Van Ness told us, though, that he was happy to let Preston keep 91. He wasn't going to spend his money on that. He wore 90 in high school, and he was happy to go back to number 90 for the Packers. I also asked him, who is the NFL quarterback you're most looking forward to sacking? And he answered fairly quickly and said, Patrick Mahomes. He's a Super Bowl champ. That's who he's looking most forward to sacking. The Packers do not play the Chiefs in this upcoming year. So if it's going to happen in his rookie year, it would have to be in the Super Bowl. That might be getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, though. As I said, Brian Gutekunst is getting ready to meet with the media here in the next few minutes. So I'm going to slip back downstairs and we'll have updates from that as well. Make sure that okay, sorry, we just have an update. Dalton Kincaid is off the board. He's gone to the Buffalo Bills. So that tight end is no longer available. So Michael Mayer would be the next tight end, presumably on the board. As I was saying, we will have full coverage for you for the rest of the night on PackersNews.com and the rest of the weekend as well. Stay tuned to Tom Silverstein's live blog as he finishes out round 1, and then we will have more podcast and updates, capsules of the first round, and each pick that Green Bay has in the rest of the draft. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.